So imposter syndrome, it's very real, and I know a lot about it. Regardless of the situation, the scenario, where I am in life, what's happening, I don't fit in. And I know that might sound ridiculous, and it is. It's entirely ridiculous, but I have a secret trick that helps me push through it, and I'm going to share it with you because too many of you struggle with this. I hear you talking about it in the ghostwriting group, and it's time to address it and move beyond it. You can do it. Before we dig in, a quick intro that I always forget to give. I'm Mary Ghostwriting, and I'm here to tell you everything about ghostwriting. Yep, you guessed it. And also about ways people scam you when they tell you they're teaching you about ghostwriting, but they're really not. But we'll be covering everything in ghostwriting from how to get started all the way through to scaling your own agency. I've done it both ways. There are pros and cons to both sides of it. We'll get into that in another video. But today, let's talk about why you suffer from imposter syndrome and what you can do about it. You're a fake. Everyone knows it. You're not a ghostwriter. Who have you ghostwritten for anyway? There you go. So why are you even pretending? Why are you putting your name out there to everyone saying, oh, I'm a ghostwriter? You're not. That's what you think, right? Or maybe you have experience as a ghostwriter. You've written for a few people, or maybe you're just a writer. You're a really solid writer and you want to be a ghostwriter, but you have this nagging feeling that you're like, I'm not good enough. I can't do it. Who am I to say that I can do this? And then the people around you, they're kind of reinforcing that, right? They're like, oh, come on, look at her. Who does she think she is? Or look at him. They're not a ghostwriter. They're not. That's just a fancy thing that it's all in their head. They're not going to do it. And it all feeds that big monster, that big overwhelming fear that you have that you're going to fail, that you can't do this, that you're not good enough. And then there's this little teeny tiny voice way down deep inside that you don't even let yourself acknowledge, that knows that you can, that has that inner strength and that, that positivity, that hope that says, hey, maybe I can do this. And so what we're going to do is, and I know this sounds so stupid, but we're going to find that little voice. Stay with me, trust me. And before we get there, just understand that even me, I've been doing this for a long, long time, okay? When I submit work to new clients, and sometimes even to clients I've been working with for a decade, sometimes I get that, this anxiety inside where I'm like, oh my God, they're going to hate it. They're going to hate it. They're going to hate me. And what am I doing? Like, why do I think that I can justify charging this much for my work? It's just crazy. And I get this this real fear inside. It happens. It happens to everyone. And then when things don't go wrong, well, that doesn't fix it either, because then I expect some kind of a backlash. So it's like, oh, everything's going so great for so long. I'm about to hit that wall. Something is about to happen to ruin everything. So it can't all be good. There has to be something bad that's about to happen that will ruin this. And it's my own fault. It's my own fault for thinking that it could all be great. Some days it's a chaotic existence. It leaves me feeling like I'm on this wild roller coaster through space, and it's just any moment the bottom's just going to drop out. But with many years of trial and error, I've realized that my thoughts really do direct my life. And I'm not a huge manifest your own energy or whatever that stuff is. I'm sure it works okay, great. And this is a version of it, but it's a little less touchy-feely and a little more grounded in the reality of your psychology, which I think is important to address. Because at the end of the day, the main thing with imposter syndrome is you want a way to work through it. You want a way to move beyond it and to feel that confidence to move forward and to be successful, to allow yourself to get out of your own way and be successful. So it's time to get out that pen and paper and think about, and really, you need to write this down and think about it. What am I really afraid of? What's the big fear? And the main question is, what's the worst that can happen? So the worst that can happen is you'll lose the client. The worst that can happen is you'll feel humiliated online. Maybe you'll start a YouTube channel and people don't watch it. That's the worst, okay? The very worst thing that can happen. You can't pay your bills. That's scary. But what's the worst? define that very worst thing that can happen by you making the attempt and putting yourself out there to be a ghostwriter. And then realize that the very worst is not the very worst. So if you're doing this in your part-time, you're not quitting your job. Don't quit your job to just kick off doing this full-time. But if you're just starting out and the fear is putting yourself out there and being embarrassed, name that and understand that that is the worst thing. And then think about it. Is that really the worst thing? Is someone going to set you on fire? Are you going to get kicked out of your home? Are you facing death? I know this sounds silly to say, but when you put it in the frame of what are really huge, horrible problems versus your personal embarrassment, the thing that you need to get comfortable with, and the thing that I've become super comfortable with, is smiling through the shame. Okay, I know this sounds really silly, but to be able to own the experience and to understand that at the end of the day, most people, they just don't care. They don't care what you do. They don't care if you succeed or fail. What they perceive about you is exactly what you put out there. If you put out that you're confident, if you put out that you don't really care, that they laugh at you, even if you do deep down, then they don't bother. Like, people feed off of the energy that you give. So if you're so focused and you're so worried about what they're going to say and what they perceive about you, you're just going to mix yourself up into a big ball of anxiety. But if instead you can turn that inward and you can say, okay, you know what? Yeah, it's embarrassing, but this is going to make a great story. This is an embarrassing, stupid, ridiculous, oh my God, I can't believe this happened to someone story. And it's happening to me right now. So what I do is I smile through the shame of it. I try to sit back and observe it, kind of outside of myself. And I say, okay, you know what, this is awful, but I'm going to use it. I'm going to use it as a writer to inform my next great creative pursuit, whether or not that happens. But I do have a lot of good stories to share with people because of it, so it's something to keep in mind. What you don't want to do is what I used to do, which was I would just put myself into a shell and surround myself in a ball of anger. And I would say, okay, you know what? Anger is comfortable. I understand this. And if someone is going to, try to bully me offline or try to harass me or make fun of me, and I'll just, I understand anger. I'll be angry back and, everything. Anger is the biggest self-sabotage that you can do, and it does not solve your imposter syndrome. It just builds on top of it, and it makes it harder to chip away at it. And that's what you want to do, and that's what you need to do. So when I'm talking about smiling through the shame, that's something that it's a skill that you have to build over time, because you have this well-worn path that you walk through, whether it's your anxiety response or hiding away or it's anger or whatever it is that you typically do. Your typical path is well worn, and you do that again and again and again, and it's hard to veer away from it. Your path of least resistance is right where you've set it. So you need to wear a new path down in your life, and the way that you do that is with practice, just like you do with anything else. So you need to practice being a fool. Okay, so this is all great, but what are the specific steps that you need to take? I have those for you too. So first you need to recognize what you're failing. So you're not a failure, you're not a fraud, you're not a fake. Even if you're just starting out, you're just starting out. That's the reality of the situation. That doesn't mean that you're a fraud. So recognize that. Recognize where you are and what your skill level is. Okay, done. And now move on to the fact that imposter syndrome is very real, and everyone feels it. Everybody does at some point. It's just some people are really, really good at hiding it, and some people are really, really good at like public speaking and pushing through it, and it looks like they're very calm and collected, but they're not. So here's a great example. I know I come across okay when I'm speaking here right now. But if I go up on a stage, I used to be fine to go up and present in front of a lot of people, but One day I was not, and I haven't been able to recover from that. So I've had times now where I'll go up to talk in front of a group of people, and you won't see this. You'll see me like, it's like someone's strangling me. I'm struggling to breathe, and I have a really shaky voice. And I have not been able to overcome that. So, but what I do though, I don't run off the stage, and I don't avoid going on the stage. I go up, I make a joke about it, I tell people what I'm experiencing because there's nothing else I can do. And I just say, hey, I have this challenge that this is what happens to me every time I go to speak, but I push through it. And I hope that eventually, one day, I'm back to being able to speak to large groups of people without having this happen. But until then, I recognize it, I own it, and I smile through the shame, because I know that everyone, or most people who are honest at least, experience something like this at some point. And the only way through it is to go through it. And the only way to get better at anything, including this, including getting through your imposter syndrome or your public speaking challenges or just anything, is to, like I said, wear a new path in your life. Create a new walkway. Like, think about it. I know I have, when I taught my son how to ride his bike, in our backyard, he was riding in a figure eight. And he rode it and rode it and rode it, and now there's a figure eight there permanently in that yard because it was just a well-worn path. Now, if he went to veer off of that path, that would be difficult, naturally. So that's what you need to do, is veer off of the path that you've created your whole life, which that's really hard. That's a lot of mental baggage to unpack for a lot of us, right? But you can do it, but it's just acknowledging that within yourself, you have this struggle and it can be done. So let's get back to those steps. So first, acknowledge that you're feeling self-doubt and it's reasonable. Everyone has imposter syndrome at some point. Okay? What specifically, what's the worst thing that can happen? And then reframe that in your mind as, okay, no one's setting me on fire today, so it's not that bad. Let's set that as our baseline, okay? It's not death. And listen to that little voice. Deep inside is a little voice that, or else you wouldn't even recognize that you're having some form of imposter syndrome. You wouldn't be watching this if you didn't know that there's some tiny voice inside of you that believes in you and that knows that you can do this. So listen to that little voice and realize that every time you push through and you do the thing, it's going to get stronger and you're going to feel more confident. And eventually it's going to be the dominant voice in your brain. And so eventually, like I said, I have no reason to feel like an imposter when let's say when I pitch a new client who hasn't been referred to me by anyone and I have to kind of prove myself all over again. Like if I'm talking to someone fresh and they just reach out and they're like, hey, I saw you, tell me about yourself. And I always have a moment for a second where I'm like, well, where do I start? And who am I? So I don't know. It's silly. I understand that it's silly, but that's my point, is that because I have this practice and I'm used to pushing through and smiling through it and just realizing that even if I completely blow an interview or I completely mess something up, the next time I'm going to do it so much better, and I don't beat myself up over it. I just don't. Not anymore. I make note of it and I use it at some point. I use it as a funny story with the next client if they ask me a question that's similar and I say, oh gosh, do I have a story about that? I won't do it like this. So it helps. Everything is a learning experience and everything helps reframe your brain and reframe how you, not only how people perceive you, but how you perceive yourself. And that inward perception that you push out to everyone, that's powerful. That's like the best marketing around. Because if you can push beyond your imposter syndrome and you can feel confident, even just project that confidence and have faith in yourself that you know that you can do this, you will eventually do this, and you will. If you're persistent, there's no reason why you can't. Absolutely none. I highly recommend that you join a writing group, find a group of peers that are either local, hopefully local is best if you can meet people in person, because that's always super helpful to have a local writing group that you can connect with, or a virtual one is great too. And then to also keep track of your accomplishments, like write down your successes, keep a list. You should, of course you should. And you should celebrate your wins, even if no one is celebrating with you, because a lot of times people won't, because again, they're just obsessed with their own lives. We all are. It's not that they're jealous of you or they don't wish you well, though some people don't. But it's just, everyone has their own stuff going on. But keep track of what you're doing, and then you can look at it each day and say, hey, you know what, I'm making progress, and I'm not a fraud. I'm not an imposter. I am the real deal, getting it done. Spend time each day increasing your skills. Enhance your skills. Learn a new mode of writing. Watch videos or take classes. Just learn more about your craft. And so as you learn more about your craft, you become more knowledgeable, then that will increase your confidence as well, of course. And encourage yourself every day. So this sounds so silly, but it's true. Self-talk matters. Like what you say in your head, what you say to yourself. If you're like, oh, stupid, 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 well, then you're going to feel stupid. But if you say, okay, yay, I tried, yay me, even if that sounds kind of like a half-hearted thing, it helps. Like, be positive, be kind to yourself. Think about flowers when you have like a plant, and you've seen that, right? Videos of when people are, yelling at flowers, you're so awful, and then other flowers are like, oh, look at this beautiful flower, and the beautiful flower, the one that's spoken to kindly and gently, and has classical music played to it all day, it grows. It blossoms, it's beautiful. And the other one dies. Don't do that to yourself. Why would you do that? Separate the fact from the fiction in your life. So just recognize that when you're talking to yourself and you're saying, oh, I'm a loser and I'll never be able to do this, or whatever, that's an opinion, that's not a fact. And when you think that you should know every answer immediately, you shouldn't. You absolutely shouldn't. When I talk to people, most conversations, when someone is asking me about a thing, and I say, oh, you know what, that's a great question. Let me find out and get back to you, because I don't know all the answers. And it doesn't bother me that I don't, because I love learning new things. As a ghostwriter, you learn new things all the time, because there's always a new learning curve that you have to surmount, which is great, but you can't be hard on yourself and feel like a fraud when you don't know everything. You're not going to. There's absolutely no way. So don't put that into your head. It's just not realistic. And set long-term goals that make sense. Don't think that you'll be making 6 figures in a month or anything like that. Maybe you'll have a byline for someone in a month, or maybe you'll have your first client in some fashion in a month. But just realistic goals matter. And don't beat yourself up if you don't meet them. Just, you'll hit the next benchmark and reward yourself when you do. So overall, you just need to flip that script in your head and smile through the shame. I won't do that again. You don't like, okay. And probably the best tip that I have beyond smiling through the shame, which I've said 6 billion times now, is visualizing yourself doing the thing great. So picture yourself before you pitch a client, before you get on a Zoom call, before you write the thing or interview someone. Imagine a successful outcome. Visualize yourself doing that and doing it really well, and try to be over-prepared. So I over-prepare for things, and it helps so much. So I have all of these questions. I read about their industry or who they are. I Google people. I know all about them, and I always know about people. I try not to go into anything cold, because that really helps with the imposter syndrome too, because you're coming in, you're the knowledgeable interviewer. You're the person with all of the information. You're holding all of the cards, and you're deciding whether or not this job that you're discussing with them fits your needs, if it's suitable for your talents that you definitely have, and if it's a good fit. So go into it with a positive mindset and recognize that maybe sometimes it's not a fit. That's okay. But visualize it as a success. Go into it and think that it will succeed, that it will be great, and maybe it will. So try it. Try it and let me know how it goes, and if you have other tips to help someone with imposter syndrome, but I'm telling you, it will work if you try it. You have to reframe your mindset, and it's not easy, and it's that voice pushes back a lot, but you have to push back harder, because you can veer off of that path and blaze a new trail, and it just takes practice. You just have to make it a well-worn path, and you can do it. You can do it. I have faith in you. Okay, come back and tell me about it.